Let's be brutally honest for a moment. You know that sinking feeling when you're scrolling through your feed and you see someone you've always respected, maybe a colleague, maybe a family member, sharing something that is so obviously, transparently wrong that it makes your stomach turn? But here's what really gets to you. This isn't some random stranger on the internet. This is someone you know, someone smart, someone who used to think clearly, ask good questions, challenge assumptions. And now they're posting conspiracy theories like they're gospel truth, getting into heated arguments with people who try to fact-check them, and seeming completely immune to reason. You watch them slide deeper into this rabbit hole of certainty and rage, and the cold, terrifying thought creeps into your mind. How did this happen to them? But then comes the whisper you don't dare speak out loud. Could that happen to me? Well, I'm here to tell you something that might shake you to your core. What you're witnessing isn't stupidity. It's not ignorance. It's not even necessarily malice. What you're seeing is something far more disturbing. Intelligent people who have made a conscious choice to stop thinking critically. They've surrendered the most precious thing they own, their ability to reason, and they've done it willingly. The real enemy isn't who you think it is. Here's what keeps me up at night, and it should keep you up too. The greatest threat to our civilization isn't some mustache-twirling villain in a dark room plotting world domination. It's not even the obviously evil people doing obviously evil things. Those people, history shows us, eventually defeat themselves. Evil creates its own resistance. Evil makes people uncomfortable. Evil, in the end, burns itself out. No, the real threat is something much more insidious. It's good people, doctors, teachers, engineers, loving parents, who have simply stopped using their brains. They've been captured by what one brilliant mind called the willing surrender of intelligence. I call it choosing stupidity. And the question that should terrify every single one of us is this: why are so many smart people making this choice? A voice from the darkest hour. To understand this phenomenon, I need to take you to one of the darkest places in human history. Picture this: a cold prison cell in Nazi Germany, 1944. The occupant is a 39-year-old Lutheran pastor named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He's been imprisoned for his role in a plot to assassinate Hitler. In just a few months, he'll be executed. But here's what makes Bonhoeffer different from other resistance fighters. He wasn't just fighting the Nazis with guns and bombs. He was fighting them with ideas. He was wrestling with a question that haunted him. How did an entire nation of educated, civilized people, professors, doctors, pastors, engineers, willingly embrace and support absolute evil? This wasn't some backward, illiterate society. This was Germany, the land of Bach and Beethoven, of Kant and Einstein. These were people who could read, who could think, who had access to information. So how did they become complicit in genocide? From his prison cell, Bonhoeffer wrote words that should chill every person living in our current moment. Against stupidity, we are defenseless. Neither protests nor force can touch it. Arguments fall on deaf ears. Evil carries within itself the germs of its own subversion. It creates an uneasiness that eventually leads to its own undoing. But stupidity feels self-satisfied, immune to reason, and convinced of its own rightness, and that makes it infinitely more dangerous than evil. Let that sink in for a moment. A man facing death for opposing fascism concluded that stupidity, not evil, was the greater threat to humanity. But here's Bonhoeffer's most shocking insight. The stupidity he witnessed wasn't a failure of intelligence. It was a failure of character. These weren't dumb people making dumb mistakes. These were smart people making a moral choice to stop thinking. Listen to how he described it. Stupidity is not so much an intellectual defect as it is a moral one. Think about what he's saying. When faced with overwhelming social pressure, when confronted with the choice between thinking for yourself and fitting in with the crowd, people don't lose their IQ points, they choose to set them aside. They trade the difficult burden of individual thought for the comfortable warmth of group belonging. They become what Bonhoeffer called puppets, people whose strings are pulled by whatever force happens to be the strongest at the moment. The modern weapons of mental warfare. Now, Bonhoeffer saw this intellectual surrender happen through radio broadcasts and newspaper propaganda, but the arsenal aimed at your mind today makes those look like children's toys. Social media algorithms aren't neutral platforms designed to inform you. They're precision-guided weapons engineered for one purpose: to trigger an emotional reaction. Your thoughtful consideration is worthless to them. Your careful analysis generates no revenue. But your anger, your fear, your outrage, that's pure gold. These algorithms don't accidentally create echo chambers, they build them on purpose. They feed you a steady diet of content that confirms what you already believe, while making you feel morally superior to everyone who disagrees. They turn your social media feed into a digital drug that makes you feel smart and righteous without ever having to do the hard work of actually thinking. Then there's artificial intelligence. We're now living in an age where you can generate a completely fake but utterly convincing video of anyone saying anything. You can create fraudulent news articles that are indistinguishable from real journalism. You can produce personalized propaganda that whispers exactly what your existing biases want to hear. The evidence is undeniable. MIT researchers found that false information spreads 6 times faster than true information on social media platforms. Why? Because lies are often more emotionally satisfying than the messy, complicated truth. The back doors in your mind. But here's the truly unsettling part. These weapons work because they exploit known vulnerabilities in human psychology. This isn't your fault. It's how you're wired. But you need to understand the back doors in your own mental operating system. First, there's conformity. We are tribal creatures, and our brains are hardwired to go along with the group. In the famous experiments by Solomon Asch, 75% of people gave answers they knew were wrong just to avoid disagreeing with the crowd. Think about that. 3 out of 4 people will lie about what their own eyes are telling them, rather than stand out from the group. Second, there's obedience to authority. Stanley Milgram's experiments showed that 2/3 of ordinary people were willing to deliver what they believed were lethal electric shocks to strangers simply because someone in a lab coat told them to. We are programmed to defer to authority figures even when they're telling us to do things that violate our deepest moral convictions. These aren't ancient psychological curiosities. They're the user manual for your mind. And that manual is now in the hands of systems that do not have your best interests at heart. The war for your mind. So yes, you are in a war. It's a war for your mind, and it's being fought every minute of every single day. The casualty isn't your life. It's your ability to think clearly, to see truth, to make decisions based on evidence rather than emotion. But here's what I want you to understand. This is not a war you're destined to lose. What if I told you you could build a fortress inside your own head, a space that's immune to manipulation, resistant to propaganda, and sovereign to outside control, a place where you, and only you, decide what to believe and why? This isn't fantasy. This is a learnable skill. It's what I call intellectual independence, and it's your birthright as a thinking human being. Now let's move on to understand the 3 pillars of mental freedom. Claiming this independence requires discipline. It requires what I call the protocol for mental self-defense. It has 3 parts: know your weaknesses, strengthen your defenses, and build your environment. First, map your vulnerabilities. You need to conduct honest reconnaissance on your own mind. Here's how you do it. Take one of your strongest beliefs, something you're absolutely certain about. Now ask yourself this question: what specific evidence would I need to see to change my mind about this? If your honest answer is nothing, then congratulations, you haven't found a conviction, you found a blind spot. Next, audit your information diet. For 1 full day, consciously track where every piece of information comes from: your news, your social media, your podcasts, your conversations. Be brutally honest. Are you cultivating a diverse ecosystem of ideas, or are you living in a monoculture designed to feed you exactly what you already believe? Second, build your mental muscle. You need to practice intellectual combat drills. Here's what that looks like. Once a week, spend 30 minutes seeking out the smartest, most articulate argument against one of your core beliefs. Not the dumbest version of the opposing view, the strongest one. Your goal isn't to surrender your beliefs, but to see if they can survive contact with the enemy. Before you share anything online that triggers a strong emotional reaction, positive or negative, institute a mandatory 60-second pause. In that minute, track down the original source. Ask yourself, is this true? Is this the whole story? Am I being manipulated? This single habit is a circuit breaker for the entire outrage machine. Learn to say 3 of the most powerful words in the English language. I don't know. In a world that rewards confident ignorance, admitting the limits of your knowledge isn't weakness, it's intellectual courage. Third, design your environment. You can't think clearly in a toxic environment. You need to take control of your mental ecosystem. Use tools like RSS feeds and newsletters to bypass the algorithms. Build your own intelligence network instead of letting one be assigned to you. Intentionally add thinkers you disagree with but respect to your information diet. And here's something most people don't realize. Your physical and mental health are strategic assets in this war. Bonhoeffer observed that fear, stress, and exhaustion make people vulnerable to simple, authoritarian answers. Your sleep, your mental health, your freedom from constant anxiety, these aren't luxuries, they're ammunition. It all comes down to this: the world will offer you comfort. It will reward your intellectual surrender with likes, shares, and the warm feeling of belonging. It will tell you that thinking is too hard, that experts should do it for you, that your tribe has all the answers you need. The path of intellectual independence is harder. It's lonelier. It demands that you question not just your enemies, but your allies. It requires you to hold your beliefs lightly enough that you can examine them honestly, but strongly enough that you can act on them courageously. But here's what Bonhoeffer understood, sitting in that prison cell. This choice, the choice to think for yourself, is the entirety of your human dignity. It's what separates you from the puppets. It's what makes you free. So here's your mission, should you choose to accept it. Find one belief you hold strongly, just one. This week, spend 30 minutes researching the best arguments against it. Read them with an open mind. If your belief is true, it will emerge stronger. If it's false, you'll have performed the most courageous act a human mind can perform. You'll have changed it. This is what intellectual courage looks like. This is what Bonhoeffer died defending. This is what the world desperately needs more of. The lighthouse in the storm. Every time you choose curiosity over certainty, evidence over emotion, and careful thinking over quick reactions, you're doing more than protecting your own mind. You're defending the very possibility of human wisdom in an age of artificial intelligence and algorithmic manipulation. You're refusing to be a puppet. You're refusing to surrender your sovereignty. You're choosing to be what the world needs most right now. A lighthouse in the storm of confusion, showing others that it's still possible to think clearly, to see truth, and to maintain your humanity in an increasingly inhuman world. The question isn't whether you're smart enough to avoid the trap of willing stupidity. The question is whether you're brave enough to think for yourself when the whole world is telling you not to. The choice is yours. Choose wisely. Your mind, and maybe civilization itself, depends on it.